Welcome to another episode of This F***ing Guy, the show where we pick one f***ing guy who's making America worse and explain why they suck. I'm Erin Ryan, host of Crooked Media's Hysteria podcast.
And I'm Alyssa Mastromonaco, the other host of Crooked Media's Hysteria podcast.
Here at This Fucking Guy, we believe that a person doesn't need to be a man to be a pimple on the ass of humanity, because we're feminists, and we like to recognize when women are fucking guys too.
Like our current Secretary of Homeland Security and America's most desperate pick-me, Kristi Noem.
Kristi Noem is what happens when women with shitty dads go into government instead of going to therapy.
Ouch. Ooh, I got one. Kristi Noem is what happens when somebody who grew up 21 hours of driving from the Mexican border gets put in charge of managing the Mexican border.
Kristi Noem is what happens when you source your aesthetician in South Dakota.
Meow!
Look, it had to be said. Okay, let's start at the beginning. Before the self-proclaimed patriot Kristi Noem was delaying FEMA's response to the Texas flooding victims by waiting 72 hours to authorize release of federal search and rescue resources, before the self-proclaimed family values politician was having what was described to the New York Post as a blatant and years-long extramarital affair with Trump dingleberry Corey Lewandowski, before the self-proclaimed fiscal conservative was wasting South Dakota taxpayer money on a plane for herself and one of the most legendarily stupid public awareness campaigns of all time, she was just Kristi Arnold, farm girl born in Hamlin County, South Dakota.
Kristi was the 1990 South Dakota Snow Queen, which it turns out is not slang for the state's #1 cocaine dealer.
She'd be so much more interesting if it was. That is a bummer.
She also dabbled in rodeo queen pageants. Between that and her time surrounded by livestock on her family farm, it's no wonder Kristi is so comfortable working with bullshit.
Kristi's father loomed large in her life, and by loomed large, I mean he was a domineering and unpleasant person. Kristi seems to think that her dad was a cool and tough guy, like a cowboy from the movies, like John Wayne or Clint Eastwood at the height of his powers. The stories Kristi tells about her father make him sound like an abusive dickhead who probably should not have had kids. Like the story of the time when she was 10 and the two of them were elk hunting in Wyoming, and her dad told her to, quote, hunt her way back to camp, and then scurried off over a ridge. Little Kristi spent the day terrified trying to find her way back, and years later found out her dad was following her the whole way, making animal noises.
It's very disturbing.
It's weird.
How about the story from Kristi's 2022 memoir where her dad was having a hard time getting a stubborn cow to go in the barn, and so in front of little Kristi and her siblings, he started punching the cow in the face. And then he slipped and fell and became pinned under the animal.
Okay, that is low-key slapstick. I mean, you deserve it. You're punching a cow in the face. You deserve to have a cow sit on you. Kristi's father's legendary run as an emotionally dysregulated farm tyrant came to a tragic end one day when he tried to break the crust on top of a grain bin himself. An incredibly dangerous thing to do, and was sucked in and suffocated in the massive grain pile. It's a horrible way to die. New fear unlocked, as our associate producer said.
100%.
But as Kristi Noem herself implied in one of her memoirs, she wasn't surprised that her dad was doing something he shouldn't have been doing. A farm is an especially dangerous place to be a reckless asshole with rage issues.
Kristi had been attending Northern State University when her dad died in March 1994. She should have been about a month and a half away from graduating, but she says she dropped out of college to help out with the family farm. She gave birth to her first child in April of 1994, so I'm not sure how the timing on that worked, but whatever.
Kristi Noem's family farm, by the way, has taken quite a bit of government money over the years. Between 1995 and 2024, Ricotta Valley Ranch in Hazel, South Dakota, which Noem's family owns, has received more than $4.9 million in government subsidies. The years with the biggest government paychecks came during President Trump's first term between 2017 and 2021. Interesting.
It's not like Kristi's family were outliers either. South Dakota is one of the largest recipients of government farm subsidies. Despite being the 47th most populous state in the country, it hoovers up more farm subsidies than all but 7 other states. And before you point out, well, Alyssa, there are a lot of farms in South Dakota, so it makes sense that those farms would need subsidies. Let me point out that South Dakota farmers receive billions more from the federal government than California farmers, even though California produces 1/3 of all the vegetables and 3/4 of all the fruits and nuts grown in the U.S.
Alyssa, it's not socialism if it helps white people. Like so many other Midwestern beauty queens, Kristi married some guy she met in high school and started having kids when the ink was barely dry on her high school diploma. I'm going to show you Kristi and Byron Noem's wedding photo. This was back when she had curly blonde hair and she could physically smile. You are not going to recognize her face, I'm telling you. It's also one of the most stunning examples of what should be called boot, scoot, and boogie wedding aesthetic that existed for a little bit after the 80s were over for most of the rest of the country. I can picture the wedding taking place in the unruly bar from Patrick Swayze's movie Roadhouse.
Noem won a place in the South Dakota House of Representatives in 2006. During that time, she tackled such urgent issues as declaring English the official language of South Dakota.
Finally. In 2010, she ran for South Dakota's only congressional seat, defeating Democratic incumbent Stephanie Herseth-Sandlin by only 2 percentage points. This despite Herseth-Sandlin's attempts to paint Noem as an unserious person on account of the fact that Kristi Noem had racked up quite the record as a driver. 20 speeding tickets, 3 stop sign violations, 2 seatbelt violations, and a citation for driving with no driver's license. She had also been issued 6 court notices for failure to appear and 2 arrest warrants.
Pretty rich that Noem is so hot for deporting criminals when she is such a vehicular menace.
I mean, imagine if an undocumented person had the driving record that Noem does. Like, she'd be putting the guy on billboards. She'd be throwing the guy in jail and staging a photo op in front of his cell. Noem would have plenty of time to prove herself an unserious person beyond her driving record. Like so many right-wing hypocrites before her, she ran for office on reducing the federal deficit and benefiting ordinary South Dakotans. But instead of doing any of that, Noem got to doing what she did best, pursuing dumb solutions to made-up problems.
One early example of such an effort was Noem's crusade against the so-called death tax.
When I was attending college, my dad was killed in an accident on our family farm, and it was devastating for all of us. We picked up the pieces. I quit college, came home, and became the general manager of the operation. And while we were trying to keep our row crop and cow-calf operation going, we got a letter in the mail from the IRS saying that we owed death taxes. Now, we had land that had been in our family for generations. We had cattle, machinery, but we didn't have money in the bank to pay those taxes. And it was very devastating for us. It made me angry. We ended up taking out a loan to pay off those taxes, but it took us 10 years. It was an option for us to sell land because my dad had always said, God isn't making any more land. So we did that, but I thought we need more people talking about laws that are devastating for families and their small businesses.
First of all, her family did not get a tax bill in the mail after her dad died. That's not what the IRS does. Secondly, subsequent investigations by both USA Today and the Huffington Post showed that Noem's family paid off a $169,000 loan over the course of 10 years after her dad passed at the rate of 4% interest. During that time, you may recall from earlier, the family was receiving large amounts of money from the federal government, over $3.7 million in farm subsidies.
And Kristi's dad had a $1 million life insurance policy that paid out after he died. The family easily could have paid the tax bill off with that. They definitely could have paid off her dad's estate accounting mistake without taking out a loan. And Congressman Noem was either misremembering something in a suspiciously politically expedient way or making shit up.
Another bugaboo of Kristi's was her battle against dust regulations.
Dust regulations?
Yeah, apparently farms make a lot of dust, and the EPA telling them to not make as much dust would have devastated them. In 2011, Noem introduced a bill in Congress designed to block an EPA crackdown on farm dust regulation. This after the EPA, the president of the National Farmers Union, and several of her Republican colleagues were like, hey, this isn't an issue facing farmers, and you can go ahead and give it a rest.
Turns out that bill Noem kept harping on would actually protect other non-farm polluters from EPA regulation, like mining and construction.
Which is classic Noem, self-righteous moralizing about a non-issue that obscures her real intentions. Okay, so in 2018, Noem was elected South Dakota's first female governor, and one of the first things she did was pay $449,000 to a Minneapolis ad agency to develop a public service anti-meth campaign for the South Dakota Department of Social Services.
It was a big investment and a big swing. But did it pay off? In 2019, the public got its first look at Governor Kristi Noem's twitchy little baby.
The campaign? Meth. We're on it. It involved putting up billboards all over the state featuring photos of ordinary South Dakotans with the words meth, we're on it emblazoned across them, as well as buying up the URL onmeth.com. The link is dead now. And then there was also this TV ad.
I'm on meth.
I'm on meth.
I'm on it too.
So am I.
So am I.
I'm on meth.
Meth is not someone else's problem. It's everyone in South Dakota's problem. And we need everyone to get on it.
I'm on it.
I'm on it.
I'm on it too.
There were like so many other things that they could have done with that money. Like meth, we're against it. Meth,
Don't
call
do it.
someone. Meth, here's a hotline.
The Meth We're On It campaign understandably became a laughingstock almost immediately. This despite the fact that Noem doubled down, I guess unaware that repeatedly saying "I'm on meth" into a camera might not be the best move for a public official. And unlike many pursuits of Kristi Noem, public servant, meth was a real problem in South Dakota. Do you know what wasn't a real problem in South Dakota? Trans girls playing sports.
Uh-huh.
In 2021, the South Dakota State Legislature decided to dogpile on trans kids rather than do things that actually benefit society. It passed HB 1217, a law that would ban trans athletes from participating in girls' and women's sports in the state. Almost immediately, the bill ran into trouble. Businesses threatened to boycott South Dakota, and the NCAA indicated that it would no longer hold events in the state. And so Governor Noem, in a move that pleased absolutely nobody, vetoed the bill and replaced it with a pair of executive orders specifying that trans girls were banned from participating in middle school and high school sports only. And it required that girls who wanted to participate in sports present an affidavit swearing that they were born female.
But this was also stupid, as biological males beating the tar out of biological females in middle school volleyball was a non-problem in South Dakota, as it's a non-problem virtually everywhere. But now, thanks to the governor's actions, girls who want to participate in sports have to verify their biological sex before participating, which they didn't have to do before.
Victory of small government once again. During debate of the bill, trans advocates couldn't find a local trans girl competing in sports to testify against the measure. That's because it turns out that at the time there were 0 trans girls participating in girls and women's sports in South Dakota. In fact, in the previous 10 years, there had only ever been 1.
The next year, South Dakota tried again with a trans sports ban, and this time Governor Noem signed it. She's also signed a law banning trans kids from receiving gender-affirming care.
During the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, Kristi Noem was a performative pick-me asshole, refusing to shut down businesses or require any disease mitigation steps, despite warnings from public health officials. She even hosted a 4th of July fireworks spectacular over Mount Rushmore and had then President Trump as her honored guest. Not long after, the state hosted the Sturgis motorcycle rally, which turned out in retrospect to be a super spreader event. Luckily, even with all of Noem's tedious hunger to trigger the libs, South Dakota is a mostly empty place without many population centers for people to cough on each other.
But there are still vulnerable populations in the state that Noem couldn't be bothered to care about protecting. Native American tribes concerned about protecting elders enforced their own COVID protocols on reservations. Noem threatened to send law enforcement to the tribes, only to be told by advisors that actually she can't do that because tribes are technically sovereign, and the law is pretty damn clear about that. And Noem did a Trump-style chicken out.
When all the dust had settled, South Dakota's COVID losses were dramatic compared to the state's small population and pretty much avoidable. Still, Noem continued to lie about her leadership being a great success a year out. She wrote an op-ed for Fox News that undercounted the number of dead South Dakotans by 11%. South Dakota ultimately ranked 9th of all the states in COVID deaths per capita.
Noem, unsurprisingly, had a fraught relationship with the Native American tribes in South Dakota beyond the whole endangering the lives of their elders thing. And by fraught, I mean disastrous. For several months between 2024 and 2025, she was banned from entering all 9 of the reservations in the state. That's 12% of South Dakota's landmass, over incendiary accusations she'd made about drug cartel activity on tribal lands and Native American children having no hope or supervision. One tribe has since rescinded its ban, but the others are still holding strong.
Now, it's important to note that South Dakota's Black Hills were stolen from the Native Americans and subsequently turned into what I'd classify as a white trash tourist trap. And we should also note that Mount Rushmore itself is a pretty egregious defacement of what was there before. Google 6 Grandfather's Mountain if you want to see for yourself. So, of course, when Noem hosted this dumb fireworks stunt during high fire season during a pandemic at Mount Rushmore, protesters from the group Land Back showed up. And Noem sicked the National Guard on them.
About 150 protesters were arrested. One of them, Oglala Sioux tribe member Nick Tilson, was charged with second-degree robbery, assault, and a handful of other crimes when he took the shield of one of the National Guardsmen and wrote "Land Back" on it. He faced up to 17 years in prison before a 2021 agreement led to his record being expunged.
Just for comparison, 2 months later, South Dakota Attorney General Jason Ravensborg was driving drunk home from a political fundraiser when he hit and killed a pedestrian. Ravensborg fled the scene, later claiming that he thought he had hit a deer. Further investigation found the dead man's glasses in the Attorney General's car because the man's face had hit Ravensborg's windshield. 5 months later, 5 months later, 5 months later, Noem called for Ravensborg to resign. He was charged with 3 misdemeanors and faced up to 90 days in jail.
Well, at least he didn't touch a National Guard member's shield, Erin.
Alyssa, every family with 3 kids has, at all times, one kid who is fucking up. I'm one of 3. I can attest to this. And in Governor Kristi Noem's family of 3 kids, the kid that was the fuck up in 2020 was her older daughter, Cassidy with a K. In 2019, Cassidy with a K applied for a license to be a state-certified residential appraiser. In order to qualify, applicants have to submit examples of their work and have them graded on proficiency by an outside assessor. Cassidy failed. No big deal. Happens all the time. Cassidy was given a second chance to meet the necessary standards to become certified, failed again. Bummer. Happens all the time.
Here's something that doesn't happen all the time. Shortly after Cassidy learned that the state was going to deny her application, Sherry Bren, the director of the state certification program, was summoned to a meeting at the governor's mansion. Also in attendance of said meeting were Cassidy, the state secretary of labor, and the governor's general counsel and chief of staff.
Oh my God, it's so extra. Bren says that the meeting was intimidating and that Governor Noem told her that she was going to, quote, get to the bottom of why it was so hard to get certified as a real estate appraiser in South Dakota. About 10 days later, Cassidy was given a third chance, which is very rare, to meet the appraiser's standards. This time she passed and was awarded her license. Several months later, Bren was forced to retire.
We know about this because Bren was summoned to testify before the Government Operations and Audit Committee of the state legislature. The GOAC concluded that Cassidy Noem Peters had received preferential treatment in her application and that Governor Noem may be guilty of misconduct. As one might predict, Noem denies any wrongdoing.
Cassidy with a K, however, resigned from her position as an appraiser and gave up her license in 2021, which indicates that she's got more of a moral compass than her mother and also that she's probably not cut out for politics. Good for you, Cassidy.
Unsurprisingly, Noem was also a shitty boss. During her 6 years as governor, she cycled through 5 different chiefs of staff. She also shed other important staffers with more regularity than other governors. Part of this was due to the fact that the job itself sucked. But according to some reporting, another part of it was that her out-of-state hires hated living in South Dakota.
Yeah, take that, South Dakota. You suck. So as we know, Kristi Noem is very much a fiscal conservative. She puts her money where her mouth is, choosing to forgo the luxuries available to her as an elected official and instead living a Spartan life of humility and restraint. Just kidding. Do you want to hear about some stuff that Kristi Noem spent money on when she was governor of South Dakota?
Do I?
Kristi Noem spent somewhere between $60,000 and $68,000 on renovations to the South Dakota governor's mansion when she was in office, including $13,000 worth of rugs and a sauna that cost more than $8,100. Noem also had a $462,000 security fence installed around the governor's mansion, which she claimed was paid for by a combination of donations and taxpayer money. How many donations? How much from the taxpayers? We don't know.
In 2020, it was revealed that Governor Noem had circumvented the regular state procurement process to lease a King Air 350 private plane. The plane rented for $1,500 an hour, and her use of the plane lined up with personal travel, not official state business.
Devil's advocate, though, Alyssa. Given what we know about Kristi Noem, isn't it in the public interest to have her travel by plane rather than driving around the state like a goddamn maniac?
I mean, fair. This one blew my mind. During her 6 years as governor, Kristi Noem put about $750,000 on the state's credit card. Some of the things she charged to the state's card were a bear hunting trip with her niece and a stay in the Venetian in Las Vegas. There was also a $7,000 charge for plane tickets to Paris, where Noem was slated to speak at a right-wing event. One of the issues people had with Noem's spending was that state resources are, at least in spirit, supposed to be at the governor's disposal when she's on official business only.
But Kristi Noem was often furthering her own interests rather than those of her constituents. She was frequently out of state on book tours, personal travel, and even one trip to a specialty dentist in Houston where she had cosmetic veneers installed and then bizarrely released a 5-minute infomercial-style video on the experience, which she posted to her official Twitter account. It is too long to post in its entirety, so please enjoy this dance remix version.
Well, hi, I'm Kristi Noem. I had the opportunity to come to Smile, Texas to fix my teeth, to fix my teeth, to fix my teeth, my teeth, my teeth, my teeth, to fix my teeth, have an adjustment, to fix my teeth, my teeth, my teeth from a biking accident. Knocked out all of my front teeth. I did a consultation. The bite was correct. My teeth, I love it. I want them to focus on my thoughts and ideas. That means a lot. My bite is better. To fix my teeth, to fix my teeth, my teeth, my teeth, my teeth, they feel better in my mouth. The teeth, my new teeth, I started to cry. My teeth, my beautiful new teeth, I started to cry. Your smile can change the world.
Your teeth can change the world. That is...
Oh my God, that just needs a disco siren, and I am on the dance floor.
A ProPublica investigation in 2025 found that there was even more grift in Homeland. The secretary had failed to disclose an $80,000 payment from a dark money group to Kristi's personal company when she was governor. Yet another ethical violation. In other words, she was pocketing campaign donations. It's unclear where the money went, but just investigating using my eyes, it looks like she shot it directly into her face.
Kristi Noem found a partner in grift with Donald Trump. He was essential in advancing her own political ambitions, as she's too dull-witted to impress anybody much smarter than the MAGA set. She glommed onto MAGA world like a deer tick on a bird dog, frequently jet setting off to Mar-a-Lago and Trump campaign stops.
At the time, Noem wasn't saying who was paying for her travel, but a 2025 AP analysis revealed that it was, you guessed it, the taxpayers of South Dakota. Yes, those regular people she was so horny to help out were on the hook for at least $150,000 in Kristi Noem's personal travel expenses, as well as $640,000 for her security that accompanied her.
It brings me no joy to say the following segue, but it's been reported that Kristi Noem was horny for something else besides conservative values. In late 2019, Trump hanger-on and married father of four, Corey Lewandowski, became an advisor to Noem. Two things happened in the months that followed. Noem's profile in Trump world rose quickly and dramatically, and rumors flew that one of the reasons for that was that she was boinking Corey Lewandowski.
In 2021, a conservative news outlet called American Greatness published a piece claiming that multiple sources had claimed that Lewandowski and Noem had been having an affair throughout much of the 2020 presidential campaign. The site didn't name any of the sources, but that didn't stop the rumors from being picked up by other outlets. After that report was published, Noem angrily denied the rumors, calling them, quote, total garbage and a disgusting lie.
But the rumors continued, and so did Lewandowski and Noem's pal around time. In 2023, not long after Noem announced she was endorsing Trump for president again, the New York Post reported that she and Corey had a, quote, absurdly blatant affair involving one instance of them making out at a hotel bar at 2021's CPAC convention in Orlando, Florida. At the time, the 51-year-old Noem had been married to her husband Byron for 30 years and was about to become a grandmother for the first time.
We should mention that Noem has never stopped posting mushy messages about her husband Byron. Back in 2019, shortly before she and Corey became a political nightmare blunt rotation, she devoted her Father's Day Governor's column to her husband, writing, Father's Day is the perfect opportunity for me to stop for a moment and express to him how grateful I am that our children have such an incredible father. Byron is a partner in all I do and a helpmate through peaceful and busy times. He's not perfect, but he's perfect for me. In the column, she also praises him for having a clean house waiting for her when she returns home from long days at work.
He sounds like a great wife.
Nobody tell Jesse Waters Kristi Noem's marriage is woke.
I'd like to point out that a few months after the alleged 2021 CPAC makeout sesh, her alleged affair partner, Corey Lewandowski, was accused of drunkenly groping and saying, quote, vile and disgusting things to a conservative donor named, I shit you not, Trashelle, at a charity event in Las Vegas. Shortly after that, Noem publicly cut ties with Lewandowski professionally, that is, although the professional separation only lasted until the following May, when Lewandowski and Noem were seen together at campaign events again. This fucking guy is brought to you by Hysteria. Typical children's vitamins are basically a candy in disguise, filled with 2 teaspoons of sugar, unhealthy chemicals, and other gummy additives growing kids should never eat. That's why Hysteria created a super-powered chewable vitamin. Hysteria is made with 0 sugar and 0 gummy additives, yet it tastes great and is perfect for picky eaters. I've got a 3.5-year-old. You know what she likes? Meatballs, pancakes, and Hysteria vitamins. Hysteria fills in the most common gaps in modern children's diets, especially if your child, like mine, is eating a meatball and pancake-based diet, to provide the full-body nourishment our kids need with a yummy taste they love. Formulated with the help of pediatricians and nutritional experts, Haya is pressed with a blend of 12 organic fruits and veggies, then supercharged with 15 essential vitamins and minerals, including vitamin D, B12, C, zinc, folate, and many others, to help support immune system, energy, brain function, teeth, bones, and more. It's non-GMO, vegan, dairy-free, allergy-free, gelatin-free, nut-free, and everything else you can imagine. Every single batch is third-party tested for heavy metals and microbials in a qualified GMP-compliant lab using scientifically validated testing methods, so you know the product is safe and nutritious. Haya is designed for kids 2 and up and sent straight to your door, so parents have one less thing to worry about. My daughter calls these her alphaba vitamins because they are pink, green, and yellow, and alphaba's green, and Glinda is pink. She's really in a wicked phase now. She is the pickiest child in the world, and she asks to take them, and it makes me feel good that we're going to fill in some of those nutritional gaps with Haya vitamins. And are you tired of battling with your kids to eat their greens? Haya now has Kids Daily Greens and Superfoods, a chocolate-flavored greens powder designed specifically for kids, packed with 55-plus whole food ingredients to support brain power development and digestion. Just scoop, shake, and sip with milk or any non-dairy beverage for a delicious and nutritious boost your kids will actually enjoy. We've worked out a special deal with Haya for their best-selling children's vitamin. Receive 50% off your first order. To claim this deal, you must go to hayahealth.com/guy. This deal is not available on the regular website. Go to HIYAHEALTH.com/guy and get your kids the full body nourishment they need to grow into healthy adults.
The rumors that Lewandowski was, quote, 100% banging Kristi Noem were met with a flat denial from Noem's camp. And if Noem's general attitude towards other people's personal choices was live and let live, and people's relationships are their own business, well, we probably wouldn't care.
Kristi Noem, however, has championed policies that intrude into America's bedrooms and bodies. In addition to banning trans healthcare and being a staunch opponent of abortion rights, Noem is a longtime opponent of gay marriage, and as a member of Congress, supported a constitutional amendment to declare that marriage is between one man and one woman.
To be fair, that was before she was alleged to believe that marriage was between one woman, one man, and Corey Lewandowski. But beyond that, sorry not sorry, to talk about your alleged philandering, Kristi, if we don't get privacy, then neither do you. Whoever was behind pushing the story out over and over in an attempt to quash Noem's veep-stake ambitions probably could have saved themselves the trouble, though, because Kristi Noem was about to derail her ambitions all on her own without anybody's help, except maybe her ghostwriter.
Ah, yes. The book tour. Let me set the scene. It's early 2024. Kristi Noem's physical and spiritual transition from wide-eyed farm girl with a 1980s small-town salon lookbook-ass haircut to the filler and Botox abomination wincing through enormous veneers beneath a hay bale of Utah curl extensions of Trump 2.0 is nearly complete. She has been MAGAfied. She has been yassified.
Kristi Noem is approaching the pub date for her second memoir in 3 years. Girl, what? Nobody's that interesting. But as members of the press get their hands on the galley copies of her second book, No Going Back, there are some issues, to say the least. The first that people noticed was that in No Going Back, Noem seemed to brag about the tough farm decision to shoot and kill her 14-month-old puppy Cricket, as well as an unnamed goat. The splashy animal cruelty anecdotes did get Kristi Noem attention, but like the Meth We're On It campaign, it was not the good kind of attention. People started reading the book more closely and noticing that it didn't seem true.
Some of Kristi's fibs were side-eyed because there was no mention of them in 2022's Not My First Rodeo. Others were caught because as more people got their hands on advanced copies of the book, they pointed out they couldn't possibly have happened. Seems like something an editor should have caught.
Or the person whose name is on the book. How did Kristi not know what was in her own book? One of the big factual whiffs was Noem's claim that when she was on the House Armed Services Committee, she had personally met with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Except Kim Jong-un did not leave North Korea until 2018, and Kristi Noem's term in Congress ended in 2015. There was also no record of the meeting. Luckily, Kristi Noem had a great answer prepared for why her book made something up entirely.
When you write in the book, I remember when I met with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un, I'm sure he underestimated me. That, as I understand, is now being removed from the book at your request.
Yes,
that
when I
correct?
became aware of that, we changed the content, and the future editions will be adjusted. And, I appreciate that. I've met with many, many world leaders. I've traveled around the world. I should not have put that anecdote in the book, and at my request, they have
That
removed
specific
it.
meeting didn't happen?
I'm saying that I'm not talking about that meeting. I'm not talking about my meetings with world leaders.
But you
there's
do
some
talk
that are
about
in the
meetings
book.
with world
There's
leaders.
some that are in the book, and then there's some that's not in the book. Many
But why
of them,
are there
actually.
two specific mentions of meeting Kim Jong-un and talking about him? Did you tell your ghostwriter to write that?
I've specifically have worked on policy for over 30 years. And over that time, I have traveled around the world, and I have met with leaders around the world. And that anecdote, I've asked them to change the content, and it will be removed.
It's a simple question. Did you or did you not meet with Kim Jong-un?
That's the answer that I have for you, is that it will be adjusted, and as soon as I became aware of it, that content was removed.
Erin, as soon as I realized I wasn't Dennis Rodman.
As soon as I realized what was written in the book that is allegedly written by me. Alyssa, something also that I don't think very many people have commented on about that interview. She said she's been working in policy for 30 years.
30 years?
She was first elected to an elected office in 2006 to the South Dakota State House. So let's do some math. What year is it? 2025 minus 2006.
Erin.
Is that 30? Or is that more or
math
less
does
than
not
30?
math.
Noem also said that she was slated to meet French President Emmanuel Macron, but canceled the meeting because Macron was too pro-Hamas for her. French officials were like, we never invited you to a meeting.
She also said that former United Nations ambassador from Trump 1.0, Nikki Haley, had called and kind of threatened her. When reached for comment, a Haley spokesperson said that nothing like that had happened. The call had been positive, and that, quote, how she would twist that into a threat is just plain weird. What? It'd have been one thing if she lied about people she knew who weren't famous, but she was lying about very well-known public figures with spokespeople and PR firms. What did she think would happen?
Noem also fudged the South Dakota congressional delegation's response to the release of the Access Hollywood, aka the Grab 'em by the Pussy tape in 2016. No Going Back claims that Senator Mike Rounds called for Trump to drop out of the race. Rounds has demanded a correction.
Fun fact about Senator Mike Rounds, the guy who he beat in the Republican Senate primary was Jason Ravensborg, the drunk driving hit and run attorney general. South Dakota is so small.
And yet they get the same number of senators as California.
While the random lies about foreign leaders turned some people off, what really stuck with the public was the animal cruelty. Call it cricket's revenge. Here are a few Kristi Noem headlines from that news cycle. Noem in political freefall as book inaccuracies emerge following backlash against animal killings.
What a headline.
Trump VP contender Kristi Noem defends killing her dog. And from her home state of South Dakota, puppy-killing Kristi Noem may have brought us together.
Aw. Ultimately, Noem blamed her ghostwriter because, of course, it was somebody else's fault.
I guess we'll never know how a vice presidential debate involving the eerily frozen face of MAGA Kristi Noem would have looked. But unfortunately for us, we do know how her tenure in a presidential administration looks.
When Donald Trump announced that he would be nominating Noem to be the Secretary of Homeland Security, Noem claimed that this was the position she'd always hoped for, which, yeah, the fuck right. Before she was made Secretary of Homeland Security, the most time Kristi Noem had spent near the southern border was when she flew down to Houston to get her fake teeth put in. In March, Noem made an appearance at the U.S.-Canadian border and chanted USA #1 and Canada, the 51st state, while commemorating the death of a Border Patrol agent.
What are we, 12? Jesus Christ.
I'm sure the dead Border Patrol agent's family appreciated the gesture. In May, Noem claimed before a Senate committee that habeas corpus is, quote, a right the president has.
Secretary Noem, what is habeas corpus?
Well, habeas corpus is a constitutional right that the president has to be able to remove people from this country and suspend their right to...
Let me stop you, ma'am. Habeas
right
corpus, excuse me, that's incorrect.
President
habeas
Lincoln
corpus,
used it.
Excuse me. Habeas corpus is the legal principle that requires that the government provide a public reason for detaining and imprisoning people. If not for that protection, the government could simply arrest people, including American citizens, and hold them indefinitely for no reason. Habeas corpus is the foundational right that separates free societies like America from police states like North Korea. So, Secretary Noem, do you support the core protection that habeas corpus provides, that the government must provide a public reason in order to detain and imprison someone.
Yeah, I support habeas corpus. I also recognize that the President of the United States has the authority under the Constitution to decide if it should be suspended or not.
It has never
Let us be clear, though,
it has never been done. It has never been done without approval of Congress. Even Abraham Lincoln got retroactive approval from Congress.
To be clear, if a Democrat gave that exact performance, Erin, you and I would be here calling for them to be impeached.
That is a pageant answer. Sometimes people give the wrong answer and it's like a spin or a misreading, but that was a wrong answer where it's like, this bitch doesn't know at all what this means.
Noem's barely disguised racial animus against non-white immigrants has shown through in her attempts to revoke temporary protected status from Venezuelans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Hondurans, exposing tens of thousands of hardworking human beings to fear, violence, and uncertainty.
She's put her name and face on immigrant raids that have disrupted families and communities and created an environment of disorganization and distrust of law enforcement. All this from an image-obsessed hayseed who probably couldn't navigate a major city's subway system without crying math tears. One of the most telling Kristi Noem moments in recent memory is the time she parachuted into Los Angeles to pretend like she and Trump were seizing control from the duly elected mayor and governor due to riots. I was here during the alleged riots. There were no riots. Frankly, I've seen more intense riots over Tickle Me Elmo dolls.
During that bizarre proclamation, Secretary Noem was interrupted by one of California Senators, Alex Padilla, who dared identify himself in an attempt to ask her a question before being tackled to the ground by masked law enforcement. Kristi Noem immediately lied about what had happened.
We were conducting a press conference to update everyone on the enforcement actions that are ongoing to bring peace to the city of Los Angeles. And this man burst into the room, started lunging towards the podium, interrupting me and elevating his voice, and was stopped, did not identify himself, and was removed from the room. So as soon as he identified himself, appropriate actions were taken. But I would say that, I had a conversation with the senator after this. We sat down for 10 to 15 minutes and talked about the fact that nobody knew who he was.
The minute he said Senator Alex Padilla, hands should have been off.
That's disgusting.
Well, great job, Kristi, because all of your hard work has served to make the public more sympathetic to and supportive of immigration. Gallup polling released in mid-July showed that over the last year, the percentage of Americans who say they want immigration decreased has gone down from 55% to 30%, and a record high 79% of respondents said they consider immigration to be good for the country. Support is also way down for the border wall and for mass deportations.
So Kristi Noem is doing a shitty job getting voters on board with the Trump administration's already unpopular approach to border security. I had no idea that the taco stand down the street was such a threat to Americans at large, Kristi. But how well is she managing FEMA?
In the words of Real Housewife Dorinda, not well, bitch. Noem has always been driven more by optics than by public good or morality throughout her post-farm career. She's a human photo op, and that drive for optics doesn't really translate to being able to do a job that depends more on abandoning theatrics for results than most jobs in the federal government.
Like running FEMA.
Bingo. Oddly, Kristi Noem, avowed opponent of red tape and government-imposed hurdles, imposed red tape and hurdles when she took over as head of the Department of Homeland Security. First, she made a rule that any FEMA expenditure of more than $100,000 needed to be approved by her personally, even when there was an ongoing disaster, even when the secretary was sleeping or celebrating a long holiday weekend.
When heavy rains in Texas caused catastrophic flooding during the early morning hours of July 4th, all Kristi did was post about it. And because of that new rule, her inaction hamstrung FEMA. In fact, it took Secretary Noem 72 hours to release federal assistance to the flood-impacted areas. That meant fewer search and rescue teams, less on-the-ground coordination of shelters and supplies, families and survivors unable to access information.
Look, being in charge of the Department of Homeland Security is a big job. Maybe Kristi was too busy doing other important things and didn't have time to approve FEMA funding to help locate flooding victims and get cleanup started.
Like I said, she did have time to post, though. On July 6th, 2 days after the floods and well before she approved any FEMA funds, she polled her Instagram followers about which bad painting of her dressed like a cowgirl should be hung in the South Dakota governor's mansion.
Whew.
Let's just take a step back for a second and reflect on how aggressively vain and dumb this is, Alyssa. Imagine if 2 days after Sandy Hook, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton posted an album of pinup photos she'd taken to commemorate being 65 and sexy and, asked users to pick their favorite. Like, it's unserious behavior.
Something else Kristi Noem did to make life worse for flood victims, from July 7th through the 10th, FEMA's call centers went offline because Noem had fired the contractors that staffed them and failed to replace them in time. So a lot of flood victims couldn't even reach out for help over the phone. On July 9th, for some reason, Secretary Noem said she thought FEMA, as it exists, should be completely eliminated. When confronted with her veritable rodeo of failure and mismanagement, she called the reports trash and blamed the media and Democrats.
This despite the fact that the county that suffered the largest losses from the floods is a deep red county that rejected federal funding for a flood warning system on the grounds that it was offered by the Biden administration. As of our recording, at least 140 people have died and more than 160 are still missing, most of them in Kerr County, which again is not run by Democrats. Many of the missing are little girls from Camp Mystic. The government ineptitude and lib-owning ethos that made the Kerr County tragedy so much worse than it needed to be echoes the way Noem handled disaster preparedness as governor of South Dakota. She, like Kerr County, turned down federal money meant to shore up climate resilience in her state. She turned down funding for projects that would have lowered flood damage. She refused to activate the South Dakota National Guard during a 2019 flood in southeastern South Dakota on the grounds that it would cost too much and that local officials didn't ask. Interesting that she activated the Guard when people were protesting her fireworks display, though. Interesting. Just pointing that out. While she made a show of turning down money meant to prevent disaster, she was quick to hold out her cap for federal relief. Weeks later, Noem asked the federal government for money from FEMA to clean up. So far, impacted residents of South Dakota have gotten $9.1 million in federal aid.
This coming from the woman who spent $13,000 on 4 rugs for her mansion.
Airfare to France? Essential. Flood relief?
Yeah, but does flood relief give Kristi Noem a photo opportunity? I think not.
Yeah, let's talk about Kristi Noem's debilitating obsession with dressing up in costumes and pretending that she's doing important physical labor. She's like a one-woman Spirit Halloween if Spirit were bought out by fascists.
In the world of pageants, they'd call how Kristi looks when pretending to do jobs full glitz. When Noem and her ilk were in Los Angeles pretending to quash imaginary riots, she reportedly traveled with a hair and makeup team before she pretended to be involved in immigration raids. Here's Kristi Noem wearing a full face of makeup pretending to be an ICE agent. I mean, among the most outrageous.
Girl! What are you doing with the gun? You're a hunter.
Literally at his head.
Girl, careful with that gun. You've killed enough puppies to know what those things do, right?
Here's Kristi Noem pretending to be a firefighter. I bet she saved whatever was burning.
Do you need a little help with your hose? But really, I mean, like the playful piggy tails and the full glam. And it's like, are you it's like I'm like a law enforcement official, but sexy. Here's Kristi Noem dressed up like an electrician about to light her hair extensions on fire.
What?
You know what? She's always dressed like she's in the first act of a porno about the thing that she's dressed.
That is 100% the most accurate description of every one of these photos.
It's 2006.
Yep.
We're shooting a plumbing-themed porno.
It's feminist because you're the plumber.
Yeah, right. This is about working women. This is about women in STEM. One that puzzled me a bit was when she did a photo op in front of an El Salvadoran prison cell wearing a $50,000 Rolex. I guess the intent of the photo op was to show how dangerous the criminals being held there were. Like, look at all those tattoos, But it's hard to pay attention to the leering Skins team behind her while Kristi waves that watch around like she's in a Hype Williams video.
It's giving wife of kleptocrat.
Yes, yes.
But in a place that is being sanctioned by most manufacturers of high fashion, like an Eastern European dictator's daughter who is trying to be a pop star.
What can I say about Kristi Noem that hasn't already been shouted at her by a driver whose life she endangered by running a stop sign? What can I say about her that hasn't already been said by a member of a Native American tribe who she accused of aiding and abetting cartels, or taxpayers of South Dakota who are uncomfortable with the idea of funding their governor's probable membership to the extramarital Mile High Club? So I'll say this. Kristi Noem is so desperate for the approval of the worst kind of men that she doesn't care who she hurts in pursuit of it. She's the final boss of Pickmesia. She's an embarrassment to her state. She's an embarrassment to the country. And if I were that Texas specialty dentist, I'd issue a takedown notice for that veneers video. Well, there you have it. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. All right, Alyssa, let me remind you, the y-axis runs from reckless dumbass to scheming sociopath. And the x-axis runs from opportunist to true believing zealot.
She is a reckless dumbass and an opportunist.
Ooh, that's a bad quadrant.
Don't you think?
That's a bad
But
quadrant.
I think it's right.
Yeah, I think I can see that. I think she is. I agree. I think she's in the unfortunate. She's in the dumbass quadrant. But sometimes being a dumbass is really helpful because you don't think about all the reasons that you shouldn't do something.
You don't have shame.
You're just running stop signs throughout life. All right. Well, that's all the time we have for this episode of This Fucking Guy, your home for Regina George progressivism.
If you like what you've seen, please like, subscribe, and share with friends you think would get a kick out of us.
And if you have some suggestions for future subjects of This Fucking Guy, please leave them in the comments. We love hearing from you.
See you next time.